Hi everyone who's here so far.
Okay, well, hello everyone. Welcome to the last New Asia English evening of this term. This is DIY Childhood Snacks with the Yale Teaching Fellows, the three of us. So welcome and thank you all for coming. I see some familiar faces in the Zoom, which is awesome. But also welcome those of you who maybe we haven't met before. So just kind of a quick introduction to who we are. We are the Yale Teaching Fellows, and we basically teach New Asia general education courses, and we also teach courses in the Department of English. So you might have seen us around either from those courses or last semester we also participated in the English tables, where we went to the New Asia staff canteen for lunch every 2 weeks. And also, even before that, Sharon and I were part of the previous year's English evening about the 4 regional identities in the US. I don't know if anyone ever went to either of those events, but if so, then maybe you have seen us around. Maybe we're a little bit familiar to you. But either way, that's just a little bit about us. And yeah, without further ado, I will get started. So as mentioned, we are going to be talking about DIY childhood snacks. So basically, snacks or kind of quick meals that we grew up eating or that have some sort of cultural or personal significance to us, but also DIY in the sense that they're pretty easy to make, and so we'll actually take you through how to make some of these, or all of these actually. And then at the end, we'll have a very special demonstration actually led by Kento, who will lead us through his chosen DIY childhood snack. And I realize I didn't mention our names, but I'm Kelly, this is Sharon.
I'm Sharon.
And this is Kento.
Hi.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So I will go first. So the DIY childhood snack that I would like to introduce to all of you is called goi cung, which is more commonly known as Vietnamese spring rolls. So typically that's what it's called, but actually what it translates to directly is salad rolls. But either way, kind of most people would know them as Vietnamese spring rolls. And they are basically, I don't know if anyone has ever eaten these before, seen them before, but they're kind of a quick appetizer, light kind of snack or light meal even, that is very typical for Vietnamese people. And I wanted to introduce this to you because actually my parents were born and raised in Vietnam before they immigrated over to the US. And I grew up in the US, but I grew up eating a lot of Vietnamese food and being entrenched in a lot of Vietnamese culture. So this is actually one of my favorite Vietnamese foods ever that I ate a lot of times in my childhood and that I have really good memories kind of making with my mom as I was growing up. Has anyone ever had this before? Just as a kind of curiosity of mine.
You can check the chat.
You can type in the chat that you have, or maybe you can unmute yourselves. I don't know if you've ever had it before. Yeah, maybe not, but hopefully I can convince you that it's good enough that you can make it yourself or that you can go and try it at a restaurant. And then there's some in the chat who says you have tried it, or maybe you hope to try it one day. Looks yummy. Awesome, yeah, great. So I'll take you through kind of how to make it on your own, or at least the version that I make usually with my family. So there's lots of different kinds of versions. Maybe you've had a different version at a restaurant before, or maybe you would prefer to make a different version. But this is the kind that I usually make. So I'll talk about those ingredients that I use and how we do it in my family.
Click on the screen.
Yes. Okay, so some of the basic ingredients that my family uses is rice paper, so banjang, which looks like this. I don't know if you've ever seen this before. but it's basically rice paper, and I'll show you another picture later on of what it looks like. There's also pork belly, shrimp, and then some mix of greens and herbs. So my family uses lettuce, mint, perilla, which is kind of the purple looking leaf, and also chives. But really any mix of herbs or any mix of greens would work. And same for the protein. So my family uses pork belly and shrimp, but you could use other kinds of protein as well, whichever you prefer. And if you're vegetarian, you also can kind of substitute it with something else. In addition to that, we use what's called bung, which is rice vermicelli noodles, which have been cooked already, so just kind of boiled. Nothing special needs to go into it. And then once you collect all of these items, it's ready. You're ready to kind of make the goi cung, or the Vietnamese spring rolls. So in addition to the ingredients, you also need a bowl of warm, or a plate in this case, of warm water and another empty plate. And I'll explain why you need those things. So the banjang, the rice paper that you need, it looks like this, the top part here, when it's not put in water yet. So when you just take it out of the container, it looks like that part. And it's really dry and crackly, so very easy to actually break off. So what you want to do is you want to briefly dip it into just warm water, just very, very briefly. So maybe 1 to 2 seconds, just make sure it's covered in water. And then after that, it will start softening and become malleable. So you can use it to shape, or you can kind of move it around and shape it however you want after you dip it in water. But most importantly is right after you dip it in water, you have to start making your goi cung, because otherwise it will stick together, and then similar to plastic wrap. But the difference is plastic wrap, you can kind of just take your time and unravel it. But for this, it will stick together and then it will tear. So you have to make sure right after you dip it in water, you start making and rolling your rice, your spring rolls. So it's a little hard to see because the plate is white, but the wet rice paper is on the plate, kind of flattened out. And then you want to put your ingredients on top of it. So first you start off with your mixed greens on the bottom, then you put your cooked rice vermicelli noodles on top, and then the pork belly and the shrimp, or whatever kinds of ingredients that you would like. And then you want to make sure there's not a lot of space in between, because otherwise you don't have enough room to roll it into a roll. So try to smush them together and make sure that you have enough room to kind of wrap everything up. Okay. Then after that, you just kind of quickly put the left side and the right side together, and then you roll it up a little until it's a roll that looks like this. So the one in the middle kind of looks a little bit lopsided or misshapen. That's okay. Practice makes perfect. But eventually you want to kind of get to this end product here. Like, looks really nice and very aesthetic, or maybe even put on Instagram, very Instagrammable. As a child, when I was making these, I was really bad. So they all turned out kind of wonky looking, or maybe they would break all the time. And my mom's would look, just perfect like this, picture perfect, on the right side here. So I have learned through a lot of practice, practice makes perfect. So it's okay also if you're making these and the first few ones kind of break apart or they don't look very nice. It's totally okay. I've also gone through that process. Yeah, so it's a very quick and easy process, relatively speaking. And then once you have folded them, you want to make sure that if you're storing them, you actually don't put them next to each other. So you'll notice there's some space in between each of the goi cung, or the Vietnamese spring rolls. And also, in this picture, the plastic wrap is going over, under, over, under. So that's kind of one life hack to store these. Especially if you're putting them, overnight in the freezer or in the refrigerator or something like that. So you want to make sure they don't stick to each other, because again, once you've wet that rice paper, it'll be very, very sticky. It will stick to each other. So you want to make sure they don't touch when you're storing them. And then finally, you can enjoy them in various ways. So one is a peanut and hoisin sauce, which is basically peanut butter and hoisinjang together. hoisin sauce. With some other ingredients depending on how you like it. So some people add water, oil, coconut milk, lemon juice. It's really whatever you want to put into it. It's very free form. So that's one way that people really like to eat goikung with. And I personally really love this. And another one is more traditional. It's with a fish sauce, a Vietnamese fish sauce called nước mắm. And it has fish sauce, water, garlic, chili, a little bit of sugar as well. A lot of sugar, really. Thank you, Sharon. A lot of sugar as well. But either way are great sauces for the goikung, but it's really up to you, personal preference as well. And then, just enjoy after that. So have fun and sit back and, kind of enjoy eating the goikung. That is pretty easy, relatively speaking, to make, but also make maybe some good picnic food option as well. So that is it for goikung. And so I have a few questions that I'd like to pose to you to see if you're paying attention. So one is kind of on the easier side. We have just gone through this. So what are the two types of dipping sauces that people usually or typically eat with Vietnamese spring rolls? So for those of you who are maybe new to the English evenings, for these questions, we have little prizes as well if you answer correctly. So we encourage you to answer either in the chat or by unmuting yourself. Okay, so Jacob says hoisin sauce. Okay, what's the second one? There's two different sauces, right?
Yeah, I think it is a peanut and hoisin sauce and the fish sauce.
Yeah, so
actually, I have just Googled it. I at first I don't really know what is a hoisin, but I check it. The pronunciation of this word is quite similar in Chinese. So it's like a seafood sauce.
Yeah, it's hoisinjiang for those of you who speak Cantonese. Do you know what it is in Mandarin?
海鲜酱.
Hai xian jiang.
Yeah.
So it's pretty typical, I think, to find in Hong Kong as well. But yeah, thank you, Ricky. So it is the previous slide here. It's the peanut and hoisin sauce and then the fish sauce. That are the two different sauces that typically people would eat with goikung. Awesome. And then the second question, which is a little bit harder to see if you're paying attention. So there's two parts to it. One is, what is goikung typically known as in English? And then second part is, what does goikung literally translate to in English? So you might have just briefly caught it when I mentioned it.
Tricky.
It's a little tricky. Any takers? I'll go back to the slides as well to give you a hint. Okay, so this is one part of the answer on the screen. So this is what goikung is typically known as. So Vietnamese spring rolls is what you would order maybe at the restaurant. It would say Vietnamese spring rolls. Does anyone recall what the translation would be? The actual translation, the literal translation?
Any guesses?
Also, yeah, any guesses? Okay, I'll give you a hint. So the first part, I believe, translates to salad. Oh, garden rolls. Very, very, very close, Andy. Very close. So goi translates to salad, maybe in some cases garden, in this case. But gung translates to something with this kind of motion that you're making when you're trying to make the food, right? So put that together and what would you get as a literal translation? Salad, Roll, yes. Thank you, Damon, in the chat. Salad roll, yes. So that's what the literal translation would be. Andy, that was very, very close. But yes, thank you, Damon, for answering that as well. So typically known as Vietnamese spring rolls, but literally translated would be salad roll or salad rolls. Yeah, awesome. So that is goi kung, or that is the Vietnamese spring roll. And I do recommend that if you do happen to be at a Vietnamese restaurant, that you go try it out. It's very simplistic. It's very simple to make. And as you can tell, the ingredients aren't very fancy or anything like that, but tastes very, very good, especially with the peanut and hoisin sauce or with the fish sauce. So highly recommend you try it, or even try making at home as well. And so I'll pass it on to Sharon for her to introduce her different DIY childhood snacks.
Thanks, Kelly. Okay, let's move over. Hello, everybody. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I'm going to be a little bit ambitious today and talk about 2 DIY snacks. I actually have a similar cultural background with Kelly. My family is also Chinese, Vietnamese, American. So secretly, it's Vietnamese snack night. You just didn't know. So the first snack I wanted to share is chả giò, which is also another type of Vietnamese roll, but it's the Vietnamese egg roll. I do think the naming convention for egg roll and spring roll are a little bit different between at least Vietnam and Hong Kong, but the typical translation for chả giò is egg roll. It's a little bit different from what Kelly has shown, and here the differences start with the ingredients and then they also apply to the way in which the egg roll itself is prepared. So ingredients. Chả giò has many things in it, actually. So here you can see these are mung bean threads. They're typically made with bean, but also can have potato starch or rice flour in them. You'll also see some, I think this is a type of mushroom, where usually you can buy it dehydrated, and then you can let it soak in warm water so it rehydrates, and then you can also add that to the filling as well. Up here we have jicama and onion. I don't know too much about jicama other than it tastes really good inside of the egg roll. And then the main thing to keep in mind is you don't want the filling to be too wet or too soggy. So jicama and onion are 2 of the ingredients that retains the most water. So the pro tip is to actually squeeze out the excess water in the jicama and onion before throwing it all into a larger pot, seasoned with salt and pepper. Yeah, and this is all before adding the meat part of it, or adding the pork. You might be wondering though, where is the wrapper in which all of this filling is going to go into? So unlike goi kung, chả giò uses this kind of wrapper. I think this is actually the same brand as what my family uses, but this brand is typically made with flour, egg, and it's quite soft. It's very bendy, unlike the banjang that Kelly had mentioned, which is much more breakable. And actually, when my family buys it, it's typically frozen. So what we'll do is we'll leave it out for a bit to let it defrost, and then actually all the sheets will stick together. So I spent a good amount of time when I was younger just being the one to actually peel all of the different sheets apart so that it would be ready for the adults, you can say, to use in order to make the roll.
For those of you maybe unfamiliar with jicama, we can put that in the chat as well.
Definitely. Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, it adds a nice crunch, I'd say, to the egg roll. Okay, so here we have all of the ingredients put together, and actually my family likes to add a little bit of grated carrot as well. And this is also including the pork. You can make a vegetarian version of this roll. My family doesn't really do that, but I believe the vegetarian version will have more cabbage to kind of replace the pork. Okay, so here you can see the jaya just before it is deep fried and turned into a piece of flaky, crispy, decadent, delicious goodness. But yeah, and here it is after it's been fried. I actually didn't, it's funny because when I was younger, I didn't really like this snack this much. And I think a lot of that had to do with growing up in a community that was actually mostly Latino. And then a lot of the media that I was seeing on television, there just was not that much Asian American representation. So it almost made me feel unfamiliar with the foods and the ingredients, even though it was something that I was exposed to all the time in my own house. But as time went on, I grew a deeper appreciation for Asian food, and now it's one of my favorite snacks. As you can see though, it is a little bit time consuming to make. I'd say it's close to the amount of labor that you might put in when you're making dumplings, especially if you're going to pan fry them, where you have to like steam it first and then pan fry. Though in this case, it's more of just for jaya. It's more of just deep frying, throwing it into big pan of oil. So kind of adjacent to, ooh, okay, yes. Tom, I think, says it looks like Chinese spring rolls. Yeah, isn't it funny? Like it's in Hong Kong, it seems most people would call these spring rolls, but elsewhere we just call them egg rolls. Yeah, I think it is quite similar. I guess this one is the one that might look a little bit less similar. So this is called nem ran, and it's different because the wrapper is not this normal wrapper that we're used to our egg rolls / Chinese spring rolls having. And instead it uses the rice paper that Kelly had showed before, the banjiang. So that's why it looks a little bit lighter in color and even more crispy. And you'll find this in northern Vietnam more so than in the south. Okay. Oh yeah. And then for the next slide, I just wanted to show you a few ways in which Vietnamese people might eat the jaya. Because of course you can eat it as is. It's quite delicious as is. Oftentimes people will wrap it up in some salad so that the freshness of the salad balances out the oiliness and slight saltiness of the roll. But you'll also see people eating it this way. So this is bún jaya. And bún just refers to the vermicelli, the rice noodles that you see here. And it's a whole dish. So you'll have the vermicelli, you'll have the pickled carrot and daikon, you'll have the jaya here, and you'll have lots of mince, lots of greens over here. And you can just douse this whole thing in the fish sauce that Kelly had also mentioned, the nok mam. Yeah. Another way you might see people eating it is in this manner. So this is ban hoi jaya. And this is basically what I mentioned earlier, where you're wrapping it up in the salad, but there's also this extra component here. So this is called the ban hoi, and it's essentially a kind of thin rectangle of rice noodle that's been woven together. And then you would have the salad, then the ban hoi, then the jaya, and then add some mince, roll that all up. So it's like a roll within a roll, and then eat it. Also very delicious. Great food for the summer. Okay, so I hope you're all paying attention because we've made it to question 3. So can someone name 2 differences between goikun and jaya? You can unmute yourself or you can put it in the chat. So goikun, as a reminder, is the Vietnamese spring roll that Kelly had just covered. And jaya is the Vietnamese egg roll that I had just talked about. 2 differences, any 2. There's quite a few differences, so you can decide which ones you want to mention. Do it for the coffee lover coupon. Can someone name one difference between Goikun and Jaya? We're really making it an easy question. Haha! Jacob says different wrapping. Yes. Ricky says Goikun uses pork as pieces, while Jaya uses stir meat. Like crushed, ground meat. Jason says no frying for Jaya. Oh, is there more?
I don't know.
Oh, yes, yeah. So, Jaya is deep fried, and it's Goikun that's the one that isn't fried. Great. It's between Jacob and Ricky. Do we have enough coupons to give one to each? Well, nonetheless, both Jacob and Ricky are correct. Goikun uses a rice paper wrap, and Jaya uses a normal like flour egg wrap. And Ricky is correct in that Goikun uses pork that's a little bit more intact, so that can be pork belly, whereas Jaya will use ground pork. Okay, awesome. So here is the second snack that I really wanted to go through a bit quickly. So these are, I'll show some pictures here. Dried banana sheets, also known as joy ko ming or joy ep ko. So joy refers to banana, ko is dried. Joy ep, in this case here, is referring to the specific type of banana. I'm sure you've seen these around everywhere. They're like the smaller ones, they're quite sweet. Yeah, and let me move us over to a video. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, I'm going to stop share briefly. Okay. Oh yeah, sound. Thank you. Okay, here we are. So I found this wonderful Vietnamese lady who's going to teach us how to make joy ep ko or dried banana sheets. So this is a snack that I had when I was pretty young. My aunties would every now and then go back to visit their hometown in Vietnam and other cities while they were there, and then they would bring back a few snacks. And this is one of the snacks that they would bring back. My aunties haven't been to Vietnam very recently, and neither have I. We've just been chilling in Hong Kong, so I haven't had this in a while. But it was definitely something I wanted to include because I think it's something that's a little bit more new and a little bit more unfamiliar to most people. So the way in which these dried banana sheets are created, first you have to start with bananas that are not overly ripe, because if they're too ripe, then they're a little bit too wet. Just, fully yellow, and then from there, peel them and then leave them in the sun for a full day. And you'll want to leave it in the sun, and that way the banana can dry out a little bit, and that will help with turning it into the final product. So here she is, putting them out. This particular, I'm not sure what you would call it, container or pan, I believe it's made out of bamboo, and it's woven. So that means there's a lot more airflow, which helps with making sure the bananas don't get moldy from sitting out in the sun for a full day. Okay, so the next part I wanted to show is at 2:53 over here. So you might have noticed in the PowerPoint that the banana sheets are quite flat. Oh, well, there goes the Wi-Fi. Here you go. So the way in which you would get the bananas to be quite so flat is kind of that way. I think I've started a little bit to, here we go. I'm gonna go all the way here. So essentially you'll have two sheets of plastic. And this ring, it's not quite a mold, it's just kind of a ring that she made. You put the banana in the center, you'll put another sheet of plastic on top, and she uses plastic so that the banana, doesn't quite stick permanently. It's plastic, so it'll just slide right off. And then she has this, kind of looks like a cutting board. And my aunties at home, when we don't really make this particular snack, but we do make another snack that incorporates banana, and she'll also use a method similar to this in order to get it flat. So now what she's doing is she's putting a second banana on top of the first one, and she will also flatten that out as well. Skip forward a little bit. She'll use her hands to try to spread it out a little bit to get it, get the shape more circular and more aligned with the ring that she created. Removes the ring, and then she just slides it onto her woven pan. Yeah. And as you can see, because it's plastic, it just slowly comes off. And then what she'll do, I don't know if I have the timestamp for this, but what she'll do is she'll leave the bananas flattened as they are to dry out further in the sun for 4 to 5 days. And then at the very end of all of that labor, all of that hard work, she'll bring it out to her kids to enjoy and to all other customers who might be interested in trying it out. So as you can see, it's not crispy. It's actually, even though it's been drying out in the sun for a few days, it stays quite soft and it's quite easy to tear open. And yeah, just munch, munch, munch away. So if you ever go to Vietnam, I would highly recommend that you try this out. It's a great snack. Okay, so let me take us back to the slideshow. Okay, is the screen showing? Is that okay? Great. That was the link. Okay, and now we've made it to question 4, another hard question. Can someone tell me, when making Joy of Ko, how many days in total do the bananas spend under the sun? It's a real test to see if you're paying attention. Feel free to unmute yourself or answer in the chat. You can take a guess. We'll take guesses.
Hint, it's a number from 1 to 10.
That's a good hint. That's a good hint.
You have a 10% chance. Or maybe even a 20% chance.
Yeah. What is this for? A $40?
$50 park and shop.
$50 park and shop coupon. Give it a try. Give it a guess. Ricky says 5 days. Excellent, excellent. Ricky, tell us why you say it's 5 days. Jason is
Wow. Actually, I'm so sorry about that, but I just have a guess.
Good guess, good guess.
Good guess, good guess. Yes, it is basically 5 to 6 days because it needs 1 day to dry out in the sun before it gets flattened. And then after it gets flattened, it needs another 4 to 5 days to dry out completely. And if you put that together, that's basically 5 to 6 days. I'll take 5 days. Congratulations, Ricky. Okay, I think that's the end of my section. So I'm turning it over to Kento.
Okay, hi everyone. Feel free to throw any questions you have in the chat. Oh, there's one from Jacob, which is actually similar to mine. I was wondering how the flavor differs from like a banana that you eat raw.
That's a good question. So it's a little bit sweeter. It's a little bit more concentrated just because all of the moisture has been taken out. Vietnamese people do eat the banana directly. It is an option. The bananas are fine to eat directly. I guess this might be a little bit more convenient to store, maybe. You can leave it unrefrigerated for up to a month, I think is the recommendation, but you can also just put it in the fridge and that'll keep for a lot longer. Joyce says, I've tried dried banana chips from Vietnam. Which ones are more popular? Which ones are more popular? I'm not sure actually. It might also depend on where in Vietnam you are. Sometimes when I've visited Ho Chi Minh City, for example, just like walking around to the different convenience stores, it's quite easy to find banana chips, but it might be harder to find the dried banana sheets.
I would say that despite having a very similar family background, my family has never had the joyeko. So we've only ever had the dried banana chips. I think it might differ by the area or the family.
Okay, thank you, Sharon. Okay, so we will be moving on to the last kind of snack. So I'll be talking about spam musubi, and this is a food from Hawaii. So I grew up mostly in Hawaii. So this was a kind of big part of my childhood. So first of all, I want to show you where Hawaii is, right? It's very far from the rest of the United States. So you can see, the 50 United States in this yellow, I think, color here, the lighter color. And here's Alaska, and here's 48 of the 50 states. And then Hawaii is all the way out here, thousands of kilometers from the rest of the country. Okay. Yes, and actually, maybe a better map to think about how Hawaii kind of relates or orients itself to the rest of the world is this map. So not only geographically, but maybe also culturally, it's kind of important to think about Hawaii's position in the center of the Pacific Ocean. And so obviously there's close relations with the United States because Hawaii is, one of the states. But also, right, you can think about ways in which maybe Asian culture on this side of the Pacific have influenced Hawaii. Okay, so when you hear the word Hawaii, maybe one of the things that will come to your mind is this image of the kind of tropical paradise, heaven for tourists. So this is a photo of Honolulu, which is the capital city of Hawaii. And this is also where I grew up, the city where I grew up. And we see the kind of famous stereotypical area where a lot of tourists visit. So there's Diamond Head in the background, this mountain that kind of juts out. And then, the world famous Waikiki Beach, which, runs along in the foreground. However, there's actually a lot more to Hawaii than just tourism and beaches. So hopefully you'll get a sense of that through this snack that I share. Right? So one of the main things that comes to mind for me when I think about Hawaii is the kind of cultural and ethnic and racial diversity of Hawaii. So this is just a collage of different people from Hawaii from kind of actually controversial New York Times opinion article that came out a few years ago. But in any case, this gives you a sense of some of the kind of diversity in Hawaii. So yeah, I kind of want to test your guessing skills actually. So instead of seeing if you're paying attention, I kind of want to see, where did it go? Yeah, how well you can kind of guess. So it doesn't require any background knowledge, although maybe background knowledge would be helpful, right? Just guess. What do you think are the largest ethnic groups in Hawaii today? And you can maybe try to name 3. So, I'll give it to whoever is the closest, or, whoever has the kind of the best answer. So that means if only one person guesses, you'll get the prize. So put in your guesses. What do you think are the largest ethnic groups? So, ethnic or maybe national country backgrounds that you think people in Hawaii are from.
It's trivia night tonight.
Okay, Jacob says Asian, American, European. Can you be a little bit more specific? So which countries do you think? And other people can continue putting their guesses in. So Jacob is saying Chinese. Okay, any other guesses? I'll give you maybe 5 more seconds to put in your thoughts. Otherwise, Jacob wins the prize. Okay. Oh, Iris is saying Japanese. Okay. Okay, yeah, I think we have a kind of good set of answers here. So there are a wide number of groups or a large number of kind of groups present in Hawaii today. So it's hard to actually have a very concrete list, but among the largest groups would be immigrants from different countries in Asia or people with background of like descended from immigrants. And so the biggest groups are Filipino, like Iris just said. Japanese is the second largest group. Chinese is actually the third largest group from Asia. So those are all good answers. In addition to people from Asian backgrounds, there's also indigenous Hawaiian people, so people who are ethnically Hawaiian, who share a similar language and culture to other Polynesian countries like Samoa and where else? Samoa, New Zealand, Easter Island, these kind of places. Okay. Yeah, so who gets it? Yeah, we'll give it to Iris. So Iris identified the largest Asian ethnic group and the second largest Asian ethnic group. So congratulations, Iris. And thank you also, Jacob. Yeah, so Chinese, Japanese, Filipino, Korean, Native Hawaiian. Also, there are groups from other places like Portugal, Puerto Rico, other Pacific islands like Samoa, also Micronesia, and then about 25% of the population is people with European ancestry, so German, Irish, English. Yeah. Okay. It's actually very hard to measure the diversity of Hawaii's kind of population because the US Census that measures and kind of surveys the backgrounds of the population of the United States is not really designed to properly measure like Hawaii's population. It's designed to measure like a majority white population. But even given that, in the 2020 US Census, Hawaii has the largest proportion of Asian Americans, so around 37% of the population is Asian American compared to 7% throughout the country as a whole. And actually that number is much higher if you include multiracial people. So Hawaii has the largest percentage of multiracial people, so people with multiple racial backgrounds or multiple ethnic backgrounds, and that's 25%. And again, it's probably higher because of simply because of kind of problems with the way the census questions are designed. So it's like basically a majority Asian or majority kind of multiracial and multi-ethnic state. Okay. And this cultural diversity is also reflected in the food that we eat. So this is poke, which is a kind of fish dish that originated from Native Hawaiian culture. There's plate lunches, which are very typical kind of takeout meals that we eat with rice, macaroni salad, and some kind of meat. And so the meat dish that you get along with the rice and the macaroni salad will be, descended from one of the many cultures that contributed to Hawaii. So it might be like a Japanese tonkatsu, like a deep fried pork, or it might be Korean kalbi, or it might be, what else? Like Hawaiian lau lau, which is a pork and kind of vegetable dish. So that, let's see. And then also malasadas, which are Portuguese donuts. And then, of course, spam musubi, which I'll be focusing on. Okay, so now what is spam musubi, right? I've kind of taken a long time to get to this point. Basically, spam musubi is a piece of grilled spam, and then you put it on top of rice, and then you wrap it with nori seaweed, right? I'll put that in the chat, nori. So this is a Japanese seaweed sheet. Okay. Yeah, and spam, if you don't know, is a canned pork product similar to luncheon meat in Hong Kong, right? And I want to emphasize that spam musubi is not sushi, right? So sushi uses vinegar rice, and spam just uses plain rice. Okay. And in terms of the popularity of spam in Hawaii, right? We basically eat it all the time. So like for, my mom would pack it for me if we had field trips and, I had to pack a home lunch to take around with me. Or if I went to the beach with my friends, then she would usually make it for me to take to the beach along with some juice or something to kind of have and refresh myself. What else? Yeah, she often makes it for me when I'm leaving Hawaii and like as a snack to have on the plane or during my layovers. Yeah, so basically it's a very easily portable kind of filling kind of meal to have on the go. You can also get it at 7-Eleven in Hawaii. So that's quite popular, is 7-Eleven spam musubi. And you can, of course, buy spam to make spam musubi yourself from the supermarket. And we have many different kinds of spam. So this is, we have a whole section dedicated to it in the supermarket aisles. Okay. So I wanted to give you a quick background on the history of spam musubi. So first, let's think about the musubi part of spam musubi. So where does this come from, right? So as I mentioned, Hawaii has a lot of people of Asian origin. And the reason that there are so many people coming from Asia, as well as other places, so right, Japan, China, Philippines, Korea, Portugal, Puerto Rico, all of these places, is basically because during the late 1800s and early 1900s, they came to work on sugar plantations in Hawaii. So sugar was becoming this kind of widely available sweetener product, and to meet that demand, Americans and British came to Hawaii and took up a lot of the land and started growing sugar. And in order to support these plantations, they needed a lot of cheap, basically a lot of workers who are willing to work for very low wages. So they brought these from other countries. So Japanese were the largest kind of group to come and work on the sugar plantations. Okay. And of course, these Japanese people who came to work are bringing their own food culture with them. And so one of the things that they brought is onigiri, right? So onigiri is Japanese rice balls, like the ones pictured here. So it's usually wrapped in nori seaweed, just like spam musubi. And it has fillings like salmon or pickled plums. And you can actually buy them pretty easily in Hong Kong as well, right? So onigiri is the kind of typical Japanese name for these rice balls. But in some regions of Japan, they're also called musubi. So this is where the musubi part, musubi part of Spam musubi comes from Japanese rice balls brought over by Japanese immigrants. Okay, so that's the musubi part. Now, what about the Spam part, right? So Spam was actually invented, as a canned pork kind of food in 1937 by this American company called Hormel, which is headquartered in Minnesota. So it's in the middle of the country. There's no ocean. It's kind of as different from Hawaii as you can imagine. It's very cold in the winter. There's, again, no ocean, many white people. So how did this kind of canned pork product that is invented in Minnesota, in the middle of the US, how did it come to be so popular, right, in tropical Hawaii? That's the kind of mystery, right? And the answer to that is basically war, right? So this is a photo of the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 7th, 1941. So on this day, Japan launched a surprise attack on this Navy base in Hawaii, right? So at the time, Hawaii was basically a colony of the US. And so there was a large military presence here, and actually this is also the same day that Japan started invading other parts of Asia and kind of really expanding its military invasion. So it had been invading China for a few years, but on this day, or actually December 8th in Asia time, started invading like Hong Kong, for example. So that's all happening at the same time. And of course, this event brings the US into World War II against Japan. So what was the situation like in Hawaii at this time? Right, this Pearl Harbor attack occurred in Hawaii, right? So basically throughout the US, there were very strong anti-Asian sentiments and particularly anti-Japanese sentiments at the time. And so with the attack on Pearl Harbor, this kind of anti-Asian sentiment and anti-Japanese sentiment grows even stronger, right? And so there's a fear that all the Japanese people in Hawaii or in the US mainland will, spy for Japan or somehow sabotage US war efforts. Note that there was never any credible evidence found during this time or any period after for that kind of spying effort, but there was the fear that this would happen. Yes, and so in the US mainland, what actually happened was the government decided to collect basically all Japanese Americans, so around 120,000 people, and put them into concentration camps for the duration of the war. So that's the very kind of sad, tragic situation that happened in the US mainland, right? The situation in Hawaii was a little bit different, right? Because they're still very worried about the threat of spies. But Japanese, as I mentioned, are the largest Asian immigrant group in Hawaii. And so they're about 37% of the population at the time of World War II. And so instead of rounding them up and putting them in camps, that would be impossible, right? Hawaii literally would not be able to function as a society. They instead decided to, within hours of the Pearl Harbor attack, declare martial law. So I'll put that in the chat. Which basically means military control of all aspects of society. So the normal government activities are suspended and the military takes emergency control over everything. So this lasted for 3 years. So under martial law in Hawaii, there were basically curfews and blackouts to prevent night attacks by the enemy. All newspapers, mail, and radio broadcasts were surveilled or censored. Japanese language schools were closed. Japanese were restricted from gathering. And Japanese community leaders like church people, temple people, religious, school principals, lawyers, these kinds of people were arrested. And of particular relevance to the story of spam musubi, Japanese fishermen were forbidden from leaving the island because there was a fear that they would meet up with enemy ships, at night offshore. And so actually my family was also a fisher family at the time. So according to my grandfather, the FBI came after Pearl Harbor to confiscate my great-grandfather's fishing boat. So they prevented him from fishing during the war. Yeah. So this is a island society that is eating a lot of seafood at the time, and they're no longer able to feed themselves basically with this food that they had usually been relying on. And so during this period of martial law, during World War II, the population of Hawaii came to rely more on canned meats or preserved meats that were provided by the occupying military. So that's kind of how spam came to be popular during this time. Okay. So this is a photo of, again, Waikiki Beach, the one that I showed you, but this time with barbed wire. So some people were not allowed to swim during this time. Oops. Okay, like this, right? This and this. Okay. Okay, so we can actually use spam to trace the presence of the US military, not just in Hawaii, but in other places that were occupied by the US military during, kind of before, during, and after World War II. So these are various dishes from around the Asia Pacific region where spam became popular because of US military occupation. So my question is, can you guess which countries or regions are these dishes from? So you can put that in the chat. So whoever gets the most correct, you'll win the prize. So there's 4. Oh no, one of the answers is in the photo. That's a free one then. So 4 dishes from 4 different regions or countries. Yeah, where are these dishes from?
Feel free to unmute yourself and say it aloud if you prefer that over the chat.
Okay, maybe 5 more seconds. Otherwise, Sharon's earlier question, maybe both of them will get the prize, right?
Sure.
Okay, Jacob is saying Hawaii. So none of these are from Hawaii. And then Tom is saying budae-jjigae is from Korea. Okay. So maybe Tom gets the prize then. Okay. So yes, we have 1 correct answer. So, okay. So here are the answers. So spam silog is from the Philippines. So it's garlic fried rice, fried spam in an egg from the Philippines. Budae-jjigae is this kind of spicy hot pot kind of dish where you put spam inside as one of the main ingredients from South Korea. and budae actually means army camp in Korean. So again, it ties back to this history of Koreans who viewed Spam during the Korean War in the 1950s as a sign of kind of American culture and therefore very fancy and prestigious and desirable. So that's from South Korea. Spam champuru is a stir-fry dish from Okinawa, which is itself a kind of colony of Japan in some sense. And then Guam has spam kelaguen, which is a spam salad. So Guam is also a territory of the US. So all places where US military has had a huge presence during the 1900s. Okay, so now returning back for the last bit of spam history, right? So we've figured out why spam itself became popular. And so the last bit is, how did spam become spam musubi? And there's actually many kind of different possible origins. But one of the most commonly cited is that it was invented by this lady, Barbara Funamura, at Jonihana restaurant sometime after World War II. And so this is one of the possible origins of spam musubi. And it's during this post-World War II time period that probably spam musubi changed from the triangular shape of onigiri from Japan to a rectangle shape in order to match the shape of spam when it comes out of the can. So that probably happened during this time period. And then that basically gives us spam musubi in its modern form, right? So thinking about the current situation of spam musubi, right, this is still extremely popular in Hawaii. But in the US mainland, spam is actually very stigmatized. And so many people think it's food for poor people, or it's disgusting, or it's mystery meat, which means they don't know what the ingredients are. Which is ironic because spam became popular in Hawaii and in these other places that I mentioned because the US militarily occupied them, right? But in the mainland of the US itself, it's looked down upon, right? So yeah, instead of that kind of more negative image of spam, I like to think like it's more a symbol of the resilience and kind of ingenuity of the people of Hawaii. Yes. So that's my history lesson, which went on a bit long. Okay, in terms of making spam musubi, usually people in Hawaii will make it using this plastic mold that you see on the left. So this is also like probably this exact type of mold is what my mom uses at home. But we don't have that, and so you can use your hands to shape it. So that's also fine. And all the ingredients are actually very easily available, and there's many different variations, so it's easily customizable. One of the main kind of variations is whether you have rice just on the bottom or rice on both sides. And my mom actually makes it like the bottom picture with rice on both sides. But if you're making it by hand, it's probably easier to just do the one on the top. Okay. And in terms of other variations, you can put a fried egg, like the left picture, or you can add rice seasoning, like the picture on the right. So this is called furikake. And this is a very common topping on spam musubi. Okay, so that's the lecture part. And so now I'll have a quick demonstration.
Oh, we have a question.
Oh. Spam and luncheon meat. So I briefly saw this during my research. So part of the reason why luncheon meat is popular in Hong Kong is actually for a similar historical reason of kind of meat shortages or kind of food shortages around and after World War II. And I'm not really familiar with the history, right? But of course, Hong Kong was occupied by Japan during this time. And so spam also became popular in other places that the US, not the US directly, but other places that the US allied with during the war. So for example, spam became popular for a time period in the Soviet Union and also in the UK. And so I imagine there's some history where maybe the US was providing spam to Britain or providing spam to Hong Kong indirectly in that way. So that's part of at least why luncheon meat or canned meat became popular, is like the same reason of kind of food shortages during World War II. And then in terms of in mainland China, apparently the Hormel company that invented spam saw how popular it was in Korea as this kind of image of American luxury food, and so they marketed it in the same way in China, and it became popular there. Yeah, so that's my superficial understanding of the relationship between spam and luncheon meat. They're actually quite similar. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, demonstration time. So we're going to, that'll go after. Yep, so we're going to switch cameras.
So I'm gonna turn off this camera and
we'll turn this one on.
And maybe we should pin the other one, right?
Can.
Spotlight for everyone.
Oh, hey, nice.
Okay.
Sorry, enjoy the view of our living room.
I'm gonna quickly wash my hands.
Okay, I'll just leave the camera on the ingredients.
Okay, demonstration. Oh, this camera's off now, though.
Yeah, but the mic.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay. So obviously the main ingredient that you need is spam. And unfortunately, because of the panic buying recently in Hong Kong, we were not able to get the original spam brand. So we got this Korean brand instead. But if possible, I would highly, highly, highly recommend you get the spam brand one, because I find that the other brands, the texture is not as good. They don't become crispy. So this one, it kind of is tougher and I don't like the flavor as much. But it's all we have, so it's okay. And there's rice. So we have Japanese short grain rice. So basically any sticky rice that will hold together will be fine. So, you know, Japanese rice will work well. But maybe not like Thai or long grain rice. Okay. And then seaweed, you can use Japanese or Korean. I recommend the unflavored one. So this is just, you know, what I was able to find at the Korean store. And it looks like this. Yeah. Okay. And so you can technically eat spam straight out of the can, but I do not recommend that. So instead you should fry it and it will become like this. Okay, so you should fry it first. And when you're frying it, first you can fry it just by itself to make it crispy. And then once you're toward the end of frying, you can add this kind of sauce. And so the way you make the sauce is with soy sauce. So you can use Japanese soy sauce or Chinese or whatever soy sauce you have. This Japanese soy sauce. And sugar. So this is brown sugar, but you can use white sugar as well. You can also use mirin, which is a sweet Japanese rice wine. Yeah, so anything to sweeten the soy sauce. So these are, equivalent. They're just whatever will make the soy sauce sweeter, and you'll mix it together just a little bit like this, and then add this at the end of the frying. Okay, so that's that. Okay, now to actually make spam recipe, I'm going to maybe scoop a little bit of the to the plate, so not too much, just a little bit. Okay, right. And the amount is up to your preference, basically. But if it's too big, it will be hard to deal with. And then before you shape, you want to wet your hands. So I have a little bowl of water, and I'm just going to wet my hands to make sure the rice doesn't stick to my hands. So I grab the rice. It's falling apart.
The struggle.
Yeah, so that's why it's important to have sticky rice. But anyway. And then you form it into a kind of rectangle shape, rectangular prism shape. And so just kind of push it together. And you don't want to squeeze it too hard because you still want the rice grains to, not be smashed. They should be whole, but you can still kind of push it together. And I'm not very good at this, so that's why it's taking me a long time. But just kind of squeeze it, and probably when I eat it, it's gonna fall apart, but it's okay.
I have a question. Is it better to use rice that was just finished cooking and come straight out of the pot, or is it better to leave it resting for 15-20 minutes before you use it?
Okay, I think it's better to use freshly cooked rice. Yeah, so cook the rice and then fluff it like you usually do, and then use it pretty quickly, I would say. Yeah, it should be hot rice, definitely. Okay, so I finally have a kind of nice rectangle shape, and so I'm gonna grab a piece of Spam, and so it comes out in a block in the can, but you slice it to around this thickness, so maybe a little more than 1/2 centimeter thick, and you put it on top of the rice. Okay, and then I've cut up my seaweed, my nori, and I'll just put the rice on top and then wrap it around.
Tightly?
Yeah, pretty tightly. So I didn't do a very good job. But like this. And then sometimes the seaweed doesn't stick on this side. This time it's okay because it's a little moist, but sometimes it doesn't stick, in which case you can just grab a pinch of rice and kind of smash it and then put it in between the sheets, and that will help it stick like this. Yeah. And then it's ready to eat. Yes.
Where did you buy your Japanese seaweed?
The Korean store. Yan Hong, I think. And then rice I got from the Japanese ice cream store. I don't know.
In Satin.
Okay. And I'll just take a bite then. Well, I don't know. That's too embarrassing.
No, it's great.
Okay.
It all falls apart.
So don't be like me. But it all tastes good. But if you get good at making span musubi, it won't fall apart like it just did. But yeah, all the ingredients are easily available in Hong Kong. So yeah, I highly encourage you to try it out.
Nice. Okay, so we're going to stop the video on this side and then switch back to the main video over here. Just 1 second. On spotlight. Oh, yeah. Remove spotlight. Okay. And we're back. Wait, is the spotlight still there?
No, let's just go back to gallery.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. That pretty much concludes. Oh, our pleasure, Jason. This pretty much concludes English evening. Before you all go, we'd love to take. Sorry, Tom. I think it was Tom. You said would love to take
Yeah.
a photo of everyone, just to for the memories, just to show that this really happened and it wasn't all a dream. Hello. Yes, perfect. So if you're comfortable, it'd be great if you could turn on your cameras. We'd love to see your faces. Joyce!
Very nice.
Wow! You feel free to unmute yourselves. If you have any like remaining questions that you want to ask us, we're happy to hang out. As we're waiting for more people to turn on their cameras, there's also 2 announcements that we want to make. Yeah, but maybe we can take that screenshot first, Zoom screenshot.
So I'll count in 3. So I will be having a screenshot. 3, 2, 1. Okay. Okay, nice.
Okay.
Awesome. Yes. Okay. So before you all go, we have 2 announcements that we want to make. Let me just. Okay, screen share. Okay, can you all see my screen? Great, thanks. Okay, so this English evening concludes New Asia's series of English evenings for the semester. However, there are still 2 Cantonese evenings and 2 Putonghua evenings that you can join in on. The one that's coming up is on the 22nd, and it's going to be led by Jonathan Wong. He'll be speaking on spoken words and slang for everyday life in Cantonese. So I would highly recommend that you go and register for these events. You can register through the New Asia Facebook page, or you can go through the New Asia website. Is there something in the chat?
Yeah, and Tom just put the registration link in the chat, so you can register for that as well.
Even better. It's in the chat. Okay, and you can register for more than 1 evening. You don't have to limit yourself to just 1. Okay, and the very last thing is we would love to hear feedback on this English evening, its format, its contents. So do us a favor and scan this QR code with your phone and fill out the form. Your feedback is really valuable. It helps us improve English evenings for the future.
Yeah, and Tom has also, thank you Tom, has put that link in the chat in case you can't scan the QR code. So either the link in the chat or the QR code, either works, and we really do appreciate your feedback. And yeah, we will stay on for another few minutes in case anyone has any questions, but that does conclude our English evening. So thank you all for coming. We hope that you enjoy, and we hope that you can make some of these foods on your own, or maybe can get to try them at some point and enjoy, them and what they are. So yeah, thank you all.
Food is life.
Thank you all, and have a wonderful night. Bye-bye. And great to see familiar faces as well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.